I wasn't invited. That's the sentence that kept circling my head as the snow came down like a soft, deliberate insult. I'd just come home from work, boot-soaked, shoulders stiff when the email popped up on my phone. Subject line, Miller Women's Wellness Weekend final itinerary from Mia, my younger sister, sent to our old shared thread with Mom. No, hi Chloe. No wish you could come. Just a detailed, brightly formatted PDF attachment with lavender fonts and phrases like nurturing feminine renewal and multi-generational bonding. It was all there. 3 nights in Paradise Valley, Montana. A premium retreat resort with essential oils guided silent hikes, chakra realignment workshops, a mother-daughter sound bath session. Room assignments listed even meal preferences. My name was nowhere. At first I thought it was a mistake. I reread the message, then again slower. It wasn't. I hadn't been copied accidentally, I'd been looped in deliberately after the planning was done. They just forgot to remove me from the thread. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe it was a digital version of smiling while slamming the door. I scrolled all the way down the itinerary and saw something that made my stomach curl. Saturday dinner heritage circle, sharing stories of our maternal line. I closed the email. My fingers were shaking not from rage but from that deep old ache, the one I used to get when I was 12 and my mom would skip my volleyball game for Mia's piano recital and everyone would say, well, Mia's just younger. She needs more. I walked to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window. I didn't cry. That part of me had already rusted shut years ago. But my chest hurt. Like I'd been benched again for a team photo I never got to stand in. I checked the calendar. The retreat was in 4 days, Friday through Monday. That night I got another email, this time from Mia directly. A shorter one. The subject line just said, fairness. It read, hey, just a heads up, we split the full cost of the retreat 3 ways since you didn't confirm in time. $7,200 total, so $2,400 each. I'll send you the payment link tomorrow, hope there's no weirdness. It's really important for Mom and Ella. No weirdness. Like that was something you could request on demand. Like choosing the calm Spotify playlist when the house is already on fire. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I looked at the photo on my fridge, me, Mia, and Mom from 3 years ago at a Thanksgiving potluck. I remembered I brought the only dish nobody touched, mushroom lentil loaf. Mom made a comment about it being a little dense and offered everyone turkey seconds instead. That was the last time I cooked for a holiday. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick and drove. Not sure where at first, just drove north on I-90 until the traffic thinned and the trees took over. Somewhere near Livingston, I pulled off snow crunching under my tires and stared up at the ridgeline. That's when the idea came to me, not all at once, but like a thread slowly unraveling. I could still go to Paradise Valley. Not to crash their retreat, not to scream or cry or force my way in, but to show up differently, quietly. I could exist parallel to them, just close enough for the shadow of my absence to stretch across their curated peace. I got back home, poured a glass of cab, and opened my laptop. I searched the resort name, Wild Sycamore Sanctuary. Fully booked, of course. All 3 cabins reserved under the Miller Circle. But then something curious, an adjoining private rental listed on another platform. A guest house. Luxury designed, shared property but separate entrance. Spa amenities, standalone key. Ocean view vibes but in the mountains, exactly their style but better. I clicked book now without hesitation and entered the name Miller Women's Independent Circle. Technically true, just independent of them. When the payment cleared, I sat back and let out a sound I hadn't made in years. Something between a laugh and a release. The kind that bubbles up when you've finally stopped waiting for a seat at the table and started building your own instead. I didn't tell anyone. Not Leah, not my friends from work, not even the group chat I muted 6 months ago. This wasn't a revenge story, not yet. It was something cleaner. Sharper, maybe even softer. I spent the next few days preparing with the same obsessive focus I used to reserve for deadline edits. I bought new boots, packed layers, upgraded my headphones. I even booked a massage for the first morning there. On Thursday night, I opened Venmo and sent Mia $1 with the note, no worries, you'll feel it. By Friday sunrise, I was on the road again. Snow glinting off the highway like glass. I didn't blast music. I didn't need to hype myself. This wasn't about performance, this was about presence. Just before reaching the resort entrance, I passed a welcome sign carved in wood. Let nature bring you back to yourself. I smiled. How fitting. I pulled into the side road for the guest house and turned off the engine. From here, I could just barely see the main cabins down the hill, their curated piece about to get its first ripple. And then I saw it, Mom wrapped in her wool shawl stepping out with Ella, who was twirling in the snow. Mia followed behind, phone already out, probably filming for her lifestyle channel. Their voices didn't reach me, but their shapes did. Warm, familiar, excluding. I watched them laugh about something. Probably nothing. Probably everything. I got out of the car and stepped into the snow, letting the cold bite through my gloves. Then slowly I picked up my bag, walked to the cabin door, and turned the key. The lock clicked open. And somewhere a new story began breathing. I didn't come here to ruin their weekend. But by Monday, they'd understand what it feels like to be erased and still take up space. The first night was almost too quiet. The kind of silence that feels charged like air before lightning. My guest house was beautiful in that intentional minimalist way. Cream walls, soft woven throws books with titles like The Alchemy of Stillness stacked beside a tea set I was almost afraid to touch. Every corner smelled like cedar and something floral I couldn't place. I unpacked slowly, folding each sweater with care, like preparing for something sacred. Except this wasn't healing. Not in the way they'd meant it. This was reclamation. I stood by the window watching the lanterns flicker on at the main cabin down the hill. Through the wide glass, I could see silhouettes moving inside. Laughter, clinking glasses, a fire glowing in the hearth. At one point, someone, probably Mia, ran out to the porch barefoot, wrapped in a wool blanket, holding her phone up to film the snow coming down. I knew her style. A shaky voiceover later, snowfall magic with my favorite women in the world. I turned away. I didn't post. I didn't even take photos. This wasn't a show. This was for me. Instead, I opened the welcome binder left on the counter. A handwritten note was tucked inside. Welcome, Miller, Independent Circle. We've set up your fridge with local produce and sparkling cider. Your massage is confirmed for 900 a.m. tomorrow in the sunroom. Enjoy your retreat. They thought I was a wellness collective. Perfect. I poured a glass of that cider and took it out to the deck. It was freezing, but the cold kept me alert. The stars above were absurdly clear. No light pollution, just layers of constellations curling overhead like stories I'd never been taught. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was orbiting someone else's narrative. I was still. The next morning, I woke to the sound of snowplows and crows. My massage therapist, a woman named Darla, showed up exactly on time. She was in her 60s, silver braids down her back, and she had the gentlest hands I've ever encountered. At one point, as she worked through my shoulder blades, she said softly, "You hold grief in your upper back. Did you know I didn't answer?" She wasn't asking. When she left, she handed me a small linen pouch. Wild rose and juniper. Burn it if you need clarity. I nodded, even though I didn't plan to. Symbolism only works when it's accidental. I spent the rest of the morning reading a book I wouldn't remember later, sipping tea I didn't particularly like, and walking the trails just far enough to see the other cabins between trees. At lunch, I ventured into the shared lodge, the only space that wasn't exclusive. It had a communal fireplace, oversized windows, and a long table meant for guests who wanted to mingle. I wasn't trying to mingle, but then I saw her. A little girl, maybe 9, curled up on one of the reading chairs with a huge hardcover about whales. Her face was half hidden behind oversized glasses, but the moment I stepped in, she looked up and smiled. "Are you one of the Miller women too?" she asked. I froze. "Sort of," I said. She didn't seem to notice the dodge. "I'm Ella. I came with my grandma and aunt. They're doing yoga now, but I get headaches, so I get to read instead." "Ella." I blinked. Mia's daughter. Of course, I'd never spent more than 15 minutes with her. Holidays mostly, where she was half distracted by toys or iPads. But now she was here in this remote sanctuary looking at me like I wasn't a stranger. "You like whales?" I asked. She nodded. "They sing songs to each other for no reason. Just because." She paused. "That's cool." It was. We sat together for a while saying almost nothing. At one point, she offered me half her granola bar. "They don't let us have snacks between meals," she whispered. "But rules are mostly for grown-ups pretending to be happy." That line hit me in the chest. I wondered if she heard that somewhere or if it was just something her spirit knew. Before I left, she looked up and asked, "What's your name again?" "Chloe," I said. Her eyes widened just a bit. "That's weird," she said. "My mom said someone named Chloe didn't want to come, that she was tired of everyone." "But you don't seem tired. You seem like a fox." "Yeah, quiet, but watching." I smiled, but only slightly. Smart kid. When I got back to my cabin, I found a message had been slid under my door. Not typed. Handwritten in sharp blue ink. "Please don't make this weird. Let mom have this. No name, no greeting, just that." I didn't need to guess who it was from. The loops in the handwriting were familiar. Mia's. She must have seen Ella talking to me, or maybe she saw my name on the guest ledger, or maybe her piece was already unraveling. Either way, it was working. That night, I lit the fireplace curled up in a blanket that still smelled faintly of eucalyptus, and played the voicemail Mia left months ago, the one I never answered. It started out light cheery even. Hey, Chloe. So we're thinking of doing something for Mom's birthday. Something healing and intentional. Would love to have you there if you're up for it. Then a pause, just long enough to know she didn't mean it. I listened to the silence more than the word, then I deleted it. The next morning, I spotted Ella again, this time on the frozen path near the main cabin. She was waving a stick like a sword, wearing mismatched gloves. When she saw me, she ran over. Are you going to be at the Cocoa Circle tonight? There's a fire pit and marshmallows. I wasn't invited, but I said maybe. She grinned. I hope so. And that's when I saw them. Mia and Mom standing just beyond the porch steps, both in matching fleece jackets, both staring. Mia's face was unreadable, but Mom, her mouth parted like she'd seen something she didn't expect. Or someone. She stepped forward, just one step. That's when Ella turned and shouted, "Grandma, this is the fox lady I told you about." And everything stopped. Because Mom blinked like she'd recognized me, but not quite. Like her memory was reaching for something she couldn't touch anymore. I didn't move. Not when Ella waved, not when Mom tilted her head like she was trying to place a familiar scent. It was too delicate a moment, too strange and loaded. The air between us felt like thin ice. One wrong shift and it would crack, plunging us back into the silence we'd been swimming in for years. Mia stepped forward fast, her voice sharp. "Ella, come inside. Now." Ella hesitated, her cheeks pink from the cold. "But now," Mia repeated firmer. The girl blinked, gave me a small apologetic smile, then trudged back through the snow. Mom didn't say anything. She just stood there, her eyes flickering between me and the door that had just closed behind her granddaughter. For a second it seemed like she might walk over, but she didn't. She turned and followed Mia instead. I stood there a long time watching their retreating figures dissolve into the cabin's glow. The silence came back heavier now, like a door had been opened and slammed shut at the same time. I went back to my own place and didn't light the fire. I didn't want warmth. I wanted clarity. Somewhere between the kitchen and the bedroom, I found the pouch Darla had given me, wild rose and juniper. I didn't believe in crystals or herbal energy, but I believed in action. And tonight that meant burning something. I lit the pouch in the fireplace. The scent hit instantly, sharp and sweet like crushed petals and old pine needles. I sat there on the floor, knees tucked into my chest, and let the smoke climb. That's when the text came. From Mia. This is crossing a line. That was it. No greeting, no question, just declaration. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The line had already been crossed by them months ago. I was just walking along the edge they drew. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. I expected a staff member or a misplaced delivery. But when I opened it, it was Mom. No jacket, just a heavy scarf and that old green sweater I hadn't seen since Christmas 2 years ago. Her arms were folded like she was hugging herself. "You're really here," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She didn't ask if she could come in, but she stepped inside anyway. She looked around the cabin, eyes scanning the books, the unmade bed, the empty mug by the window. "They told me you didn't want to come," she said. "They said you needed space." Her voice was calm, but there was something fraying at the edges. "Did you believe that I asked?" She hesitated. I wanted to. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. She sat down on the armchair across from me, folded her hands in her lap. Mia thought it would be better. Just the three of us. A cleaner trip. Less tension. I didn't speak. I wanted her to keep going. She looked down at her hands. She said you'd pull away eventually, and this would just speed it up. I laughed once dry. Well, mission accomplished. She flinched. "Chloe, I'm not defending it. I didn't stop it, and I should have." I leaned against the doorframe. "You didn't just not stop it. You co-signed it." I saw the itinerary, the group messages, the payment request. Her face tightened. That wasn't my idea. "No, but you didn't say no, did you?" Silence. The kind where old ghosts crept in through the cracks. She looked out the window. I was trying to keep things calm. For once. I swallowed. "At whose expense?" She looked at me then. Really looked. "I thought you'd moved on. I thought maybe you were happier away from all of this." "Don't lie to me," I said. "You thought I'd be silent. Not happy, just quiet, like always." That cracked something. Her chin trembled. She stood slowly like the gravity in the room had doubled. "I didn't come to fight. I just wanted to see you. To say I'm sorry." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Hotel stationery. My name scribbled in the corner. This was supposed to go in the welcome bag. I wrote it before we got here. She placed it on the table. You don't have to read it. She turned and left without waiting for anything else. Not forgiveness, not even acknowledgement. When the door closed, I stared at the napkin for a long time. Then I picked it up, turned it over. Just 2 lines. If I was wrong, I'm sorry. I love you either way. I didn't cry, but I felt something loosen in my chest. Later that afternoon, I walked through the shared garden space behind the main cabins. I didn't expect to see anyone, but Ella was there again, kneeling in the snow beside a patch of pine cones. She looked up, eyes wide. Did you come to roast marshmallows? Not today, I said. She nodded. Mom said you used to be really funny, but now you're guarded. She said it like she was trying on the word for size. I smiled, that's probably true. She also said you ruined the trip. My stomach tensed. Ella tilted her head. But you didn't ruin anything. You didn't yell or break stuff. You were just here. That's not bad. I crouched down beside her. Sometimes people get scared when you stop being quiet, even if you're not loud. She picked up a pine cone and held it out. This one's for you. It's weird looking, but I like it. Thanks, I said, taking it. She ran off before I could say anything else. That night, I sat on the deck again, the pine cone in my palm. The air was crisp, the stars smeared across the sky like someone had shaken a glitter jar too hard. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. A man's voice. Deep. Tired. Chloe, Chloe, it's Mia's husband. I just wanted you to know, he said slowly. I saw the ledger. I know where you're staying. I didn't say anything. She's unraveling, he said. Mia, she thought you'd stay home, be angry quietly, not this. He paused. For what it's worth, I think this is the calmest you've ever been. Then a click. He hung up. And I just sat there holding the pine cone, listening to the wind move through the trees, because the only thing louder than being seen is being seen without saying a word. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices just beyond my window, low murmurs, sharp exhales, the crunch of snow under hurried boots. I pulled back the curtain an inch and saw Mia pacing the side trail with her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. A few feet behind her, Evan stood still, his arms crossed, watching her without speaking. Something had cracked, and the pieces were no longer being swept quietly under the rug. I couldn't hear every word, but one sentence cut through. She's humiliating us. And you're acting like it's fine. Her voice echoed between the pines. Evan didn't respond, he just shook his head and walked away. I stepped back from the window, heart steady in a way it hadn't been for years. There was no satisfaction in their unraveling, just confirmation. Proof that I hadn't imagined the weight I'd been carrying, that maybe the silence they imposed on me had finally started speaking for itself. I made coffee, poured it into the enamel mug Darla had left for me, the one with the words, "Let it burn clean," etched on the side. I liked that mug. It didn't try to fix anything, it just told the truth. Later that day, the retreat hosted a group breathwork session down by the frozen creek. It was the kind of thing I would have rolled my eyes at 6 months ago, but I went. Part curiosity, part defiance. I stayed at the edge of the circle, sitting on a folded blanket, the sound of rushing water just beyond the rocks. The instructor was calm, earthy, the kind of woman who'd wear a linen dress in a thunderstorm. She spoke about release, about making space for grief without needing to give it a name. And just as she guided us into the first exhale, I heard laughter, familiar grating. Mia and Mom were late walking down the hill, arm in arm. They didn't notice me at first. Then Mom saw. Her step faltered just slightly, and she said something to Mia, who turned her head with the kind of smile that doesn't touch your eyes. Neither of them stopped. They took their seats a few spots away, as if my presence was inconvenient, but ultimately ignorable. The session went on. We breathed in, we breathed out, and I sat there thinking about all the ways I'd spent my life trying not to take up space. How I'd shrunk myself at every family gathering, edited my opinions, excused the things that felt unfair just to keep the peace. But peace that requires your silence isn't peace. It's control with better lighting. When the session ended, we were encouraged to share if we felt moved. I didn't plan to, but my hand rose anyway. I stood heart-pounding. I used to believe I had to earn the right to be seen, I said. That if I'd just stayed small enough, polite enough, I'd finally be allowed in. But I've realized that belonging shouldn't be something you beg for. It's either offered freely or it's not real. There was a pause. A long one. And then from somewhere to my right, someone started clapping. Quietly at first, then louder. Not everyone joined in, but enough. Enough for me. I walked back up to the cabin feeling like I'd set something down behind me. Not to forget, but to stop carrying it alone. That night, as I soaked in the outdoor tub steam rising around me and the stars crisp above the tree line, I got a message from Evan. Just one sentence. They're trying to find out if you use the family name to reserve your place. I stared at the screen, wet fingers hovering above the water. I didn't reply. A minute later, another message came in. Don't worry. I said nothing. Still, it was clear things were escalating. The next day, the resort director herself came by my cabin. A soft knock, polite smile. Ms. Miller, she asked, eyes flicking over the guest list folder in her hands. There seems to be some confusion regarding your reservation. One of our other guests claimed your name was attached to their account. I nodded calmly. That's strange, this was a direct booking. Paid in full under my name. I handed her my printed confirmation. She scanned it, then smiled. Looks perfectly in order. Sorry for the disruption. As she left, she added, You've been a lovely guest, by the way. Our staff appreciates kindness. I thanked her and closed the door, heart still steady. Later that afternoon, I walked into town. A small coffee shop with a wood-burning stove, mismatched chairs, and postcards of Montana sunsets taped to the wall. I ordered a chai, sat by the window, and tried not to overthink the fact that my family was falling apart barely a mile away. That's when I saw them, Mia and Mom, standing outside the gift shop across the street, clearly mid-argument. Mia's voice was raised. Mom looked tired, old even. I watched as Mia stormed off, leaving Mom standing there, blinking against the wind. I didn't go to her. I couldn't. But my fingers found the pine cone Ella gave me still in my coat pocket, and I held it tight. I thought about Ella often now, how her words cut through all the noise like they'd been waiting to be said by someone too young to lie. When I returned to my cabin, a note was taped to the door. Neat handwriting. Evans again, I think you should know Mia's planning something. She wants to file a formal complaint through the resort to have you removed. She said you're disruptive. I just thought you should have time to decide what to do. I stared at the paper. My breath fogged against the cold. I took the note inside, sat down on the floor, and lit a candle. This wasn't just about being left out anymore. It was about what happens when the truth walks into a room built on silence and refuses to leave. The next morning, I woke early. Not out of anxiety, but anticipation. I knew something was coming. You can always feel it before it arrives, like the air thickens in your chest. I got dressed slowly, layering up against the cold. Montana light is different, sharper, more honest. You can't hide in it. That morning, I didn't want to. When I reached the main lodge, the woman at the front desk gave me a tight smile. Mr. Miller, could we ask you to wait a moment? Our manager would like a word. I nodded, keeping my face unreadable. A few minutes later, a man in his early 50s walked out, graying at the temples, perfectly pressed vest, but with tired eyes that hinted this wasn't his first family drama. Hi, I'm Russell, he said. Mind stepping into my office? I followed him past the gift shop into a small glass-walled room overlooking the frozen meadow. He motioned for me to sit. We've received a formal complaint, he began. One of our guests alleges you've booked under false pretenses and are causing disruption among other parties. Normally we'd look into this discreetly, but the complaint included accusations of harassment. I didn't flinch. From whom, I asked. A woman named Mia Calloway, he said, watching me closely. I smiled faintly. Of course she did. He didn't smile back. I reached into my coat and pulled out the folder with my printed confirmation emails and receipt highlighted time-stamped. Everything's paid for. The name's mine. There was no deception. He flipped through the papers, then nodded. That much is clear. He looked down, clearly uncomfortable. The issue is less about paperwork and more emotional tension. Other guests are expressing concern. I leaned forward. So, just to be clear, I'm being asked to leave because my family's uncomfortable that I exist near them. He looked up, his voice quieter. We're not asking you to leave. We're just asking for awareness. We want all our guests to feel safe. I stood. I do too. Especially the ones who've spent years being excluded, diminished, or erased. Then I added, for what it's worth, I've been nothing but respectful. Maybe too much so. He sighed. I can see that. You've been nothing but kind to staff. It's complicated. I nodded. It always is, until someone decides it's not. That night, I didn't retreat to my cabin. I went down to the main fire pit where the resort hosted evening gatherings, hot cocoa, local musicians, communal warmth. I sat with Darla, the artist from Portland, who painted with her gloves on, and with Ren, the grad student studying grief rituals. It was casual, lighthearted. Mia walked past once with Mom, their expressions like stone. I didn't acknowledge them. I was done pretending we still had something to protect. Later, I posted a photo. Just a casual one, me with Darla and Ren by the fire mugs in hand, laughter mid-frame. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't write anything dramatic. Just a good night. But by morning, the messages started. First from Mia. You really think this is mature broadcasting your little tantrum for strangers? Then from Mom. You've changed. This isn't the person we raised. And finally, Evan. We need to talk. It's getting worse. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went back into town with Ren. We took the long trail down the valley, snowshoes crunching softly, everything so quiet it felt sacred. At one point, we stopped at an overlook. Ren pointed to the mountain ridgeline where light was just starting to break through a cluster of clouds. You know, they said in Tibetan culture, the word for heartbreak also means awakening. Like you have to feel the split before you see what's beyond it. I didn't reply, but I thought about it the whole way back. Back at the cabin, a handwritten note was slipped under my door. Not folded, no envelope, just a torn page from a notebook. It read, "If this is about Hawaii, you've made your point, but some things you can't come back from. Think about that." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Mia. I stood in the center of the room for a long time, holding the note like it had weight. Like it could tip the balance one way or the other. Then I walked outside, found the wood-burning stove by the outdoor tub, and fed the note to the flame. It curled, blackened, then disappeared completely. Just ash and wind. That evening, I got a text from Evan. She's escalating. Now she's saying you accessed private family information to make the booking. I told her to stop, but Mom's starting to believe it too. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched. I typed, "Let her believe it. I'm done cleaning up after her fire." Then I turned off my phone and let the silence return. The next morning, Darla knocked on my door. "You might want to come see this," she said. I followed her down the gravel path toward the main lodge. A small group of guests had gathered near the check-in counter. Whispering. Watching. On the couch sat Mia, visibly upset, hands shaking. She was speaking fast to one of the managers, her voice rising. I couldn't make out everything, but I caught fragments. "This is dangerous. He's manipulating everything. This retreat is supposed to be about healing." And then the twist. A voice, firm, measured, cut through the noise. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we've reviewed your claim. We've seen the booking records, the correspondence, the staff reports. There is no misconduct. It was Russell, calm, unshaken. We believe the conflict may be interpersonal, and we ask that you handle it with discretion. Otherwise, we'll have to reevaluate your stay." For the first time, Mia looked cornered. Not just upset, but exposed. She didn't meet anyone's gaze, just grabbed her coat and stormed outside. A minute later, my phone buzzed. One text, from my mom. Just 4 words, "Please don't make this worse." I stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding, not with rage, but with clarity. They weren't in control anymore. I thought that after Mia's outburst in the lodge, things would cool down. People saw it for what it was, her unraveling, not mine. But I underestimated one thing, the family's capacity to rewrite the story even when everyone had already watched the movie. By the next morning, there was a carefully worded post on Mom's Facebook. A photo of the snow-covered resort captioned, "Trying to find peace during a difficult trip. We came here to reconnect and heal. Some came to stir more pain. Please respect our privacy." The comments rolled in. Old church friends, distant cousins, words like "praying for you" and "so sorry for what you're going through." I wasn't named, but I didn't need to be. The villain was clear. Villain was, I didn't respond publicly. I didn't have to. Because the truth has a longer shelf life than performance. Instead, I went for a long walk with Ren along the frozen creek bed where the sun lit up the snow like powdered glass. They asked, "Do you think she really believes it?" "The story she's spinning," I shrugged. "She believes whatever gets her comfort and applause." They nodded. That's scarier than lying, isn't it? When people believe their own fiction. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, boots crunching steady through the silence. That night, I got a message from Evan. It was a video clip, blurry and obviously recorded without consent. Mia in their suite pacing, talking to Mom. I don't care what he paid for. I don't want to see his face again. He's making a mockery of everything. In the corner of the frame, Mom sat quietly, eyes fixed on her tea. Evan's voice whispered off-screen, "She's out of control." And Mom's letting her steer. I didn't reply. I couldn't. There was no response that wouldn't pull me back into their orbit, and I'd worked too hard to leave that gravity. But 2 days later, I found myself at the edge of the resort's meditation garden. There's a bench facing the mountains just past the old pine grove. And there, sitting alone with a worn scarf wrapped tight and her hands buried in her lap, was my mother. I didn't walk over at first. I just stood behind a tree out of sight. She looked smaller. Fragile even, like the cold had hollowed her. For a split second, I saw the woman who used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. The one who packed my lunches in middle school with sticky notes that said, "You've got this." But that version of her was buried beneath years of silence of choosing Mia's comfort over my presence. She turned suddenly. Saw me, her lips parted. I thought she might speak, but instead she just gave a small nod and looked away, eyes wet. I walked back to my cabin without saying a word. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the look in her eyes somewhere between apology and fear. And for the first time in months, I wondered if I confronted her, really. Confronted her not with anger, but with truth. Would it matter? So the next morning, I wrote a letter. Not to defend myself, not to reopen the wounds, just to clarify. I wrote about the dinner table games I wasn't invited to, about the birthday trips where my seat was suddenly forgotten, about the time they framed my boundaries as emotional immaturity. I didn't beg, I didn't accuse. I simply listed what happened and how it made me feel. Then I wrote, I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not coming back. Not to how things were, not to a family that edits out my chapters. I hope someday you understand why. Until then, I wish you peace. I left the letter at the front desk for Russell to deliver privately. No confrontation, no public scene, just truth hand-delivered. I thought that would be the end. But around 4 p.m., as I was packing up to check out the next day, there was a knock at my door. I opened it expecting a staff member. Instead, I found Evan. His expression was tight. Not angry, just tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He didn't sit. He stood by the window looking out at the darkening sky. "I read your letter," he said. "Mom let Mia read it too. She was furious, said it was manipulative, but..." Mom didn't say anything. She just folded it and put it in her suitcase. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure there was anything left to say. Then he turned to me. "She asked me to give you this." He handed me a small envelope, soft and slightly bent. I opened it. Inside, a single photo. Me at age 9, standing in front of a science fair, trifold board, grinning like I'd won the Nobel Prize. Behind me, Mom, hands on my shoulders, eyes full of pride. On the back, in her handwriting, "I forgot this version of you. I'm sorry." I looked up. Evan added, "She's not asking for you to come back. She just wanted you to know she finally saw what she didn't before." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He gave a faint nod and turned to leave. But just before he stepped outside, he stopped and said, "You know she's leaving early, right? She booked a train back to Minnesota tomorrow morning, alone." I didn't ask why, I already knew. That night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, photo in one hand, untouched cocoa in the other. The wind had picked up. Pine needles danced across the deck. Somewhere nearby, a fox cried sharp and sudden, then silence again. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood, the decision was already made. I wasn't chasing them, but I wasn't running either. And in the morning, I was going to do something no one expected. The train station in downtown Flagstaff wasn't much to look at, just an old sandstone building softened by years of snow and tourists. A few benches, a single vending machine humming beside the ticket counter. I got there early, coffee in hand, unsure of what I'd even say if she showed. Part of me expected she wouldn't. Maybe she'd changed her plans, slipped away silently. That would have fit the pattern. But at 6:47 a.m., I saw her. Small figure, thick coat, same navy duffel she's had since I was a kid. She moved slowly, like the weight she carried was more than just her bag. She didn't see me at first. I watched her check her ticket, adjust her scarf, glance down the tracks. She looked older than I remembered, older than last week even. And for a moment, I saw her not as the woman who'd dismissed me, erased me, rewritten me, but as someone tired. Someone raised by a generation that said, "Don't make it about you," and internalized it so deeply she no longer recognized when it was about her. I walked over. No plan, no speech, just motion. She turned at the sound of my steps. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then dropped. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. I shrugged, trying not to grip my cup too tight. I wasn't sure either. There was a pause long enough to swallow us both. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then said quietly, "I read your letter again this morning, all of it." I nodded, unsure whether she expected thanks or forgiveness. She didn't ask for either. "I don't know what kind of mother I've been to you," she added. I thought I did. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you for real. I looked at her. You saw Mia, I said. Always Mia. She winced like the name itself stung. She needed more, she whispered. Or I thought she did. I took a breath. And I didn't. Her eyes filled. I thought you were stronger. That sentence cracked something in me, not in anger, but in understanding, the kind that tastes bitter even when it makes sense. I wasn't, I said. I was just quieter about it. The train's horn echoed in the distance. She glanced toward the platform, then back at me. I'm not asking you to fix things, she said. I know that's not fair. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for what Mia did. For what I let happen. I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the only honest reply. I'm going back to Minnesota for a while, she said. Maybe longer. I need space. From all of it. To think. To face what I avoided. Another pause, then she added, voice soft. Would it be all right if I called you sometime? I looked at her. This woman who had built a house around silence, who had named avoidance peace and called it parenting. And yet there she was. Alone. Honest. Tired. I nodded once. Maybe not soon, I said, but... yeah, maybe. She gave the smallest smile. One of those fragile ones you don't even try to hold on to. Safe travels, I added, then turned and walked away before the train pulled in. I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because some endings don't need eye contact, they need boundaries. Back home, the quiet felt different. Less like a void, more like a room I chose to walk into. I opened the windows, let in the cold January air. I took the photo she'd given me and pinned it to my fridge, not as a symbol of forgiveness, but a reminder that sometimes memory can be softer than the people who made it. The weeks passed. Mia didn't reach out. I didn't expect her to. Evan sent the occasional meme. Ren and I started talking about splitting rent in a new place. Nothing dramatic, just slow forward motion. Like healing was something that didn't announce itself but showed up in your groceries and your playlist and the way you stopped flinching at old sounds. I thought I was done with family drama. I really did. But then one evening in mid-February, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a legal envelope. Thick, formal. I opened it, heart ticking louder. It wasn't from Mom, or Mia, or Evan. It was from an attorney, and it started with 3 words estate in question. I blinked, reread it, then again. And that's when I realized this story wasn't over. Not even close. I sat on the edge of the kitchen stool, the attorney's letter trembling between my fingers. The words on the page were clear, but my brain needed a moment to catch up. Estate in question, probate review, potential beneficiary Henry McAllister. I hadn't heard my full name spoken formally in years, let alone written like this. The letter went on to mention a property located in northern Wisconsin, near the border with the Upper Peninsula. A cabin owned by my grandfather, someone I hadn't spoken about since middle school. My mom's dad. The man who used to send me postcards from lakes with names I couldn't pronounce and stories about catching trout the size of his arm. He'd stopped writing after I turned 15. I'd assumed he passed away quietly and no one told me, but now, I called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. The receptionist answered warm but efficient. Yes, Mr. McAllister? We've been trying to reach the next of kin. Your grandfather passed away in late December. He left behind minimal instructions, but your name was in his file as someone to contact in case of final matters. I asked if anyone else had been contacted. She paused. We believe he only left this property to one person. I sat in silence. This wasn't a vacation house or some valuable land. It was a cabin near a frozen lake, but it meant something I couldn't name yet. I booked a flight and left that weekend. The road to Iron River was long gray and coated in patches of half-melted snow. When I pulled up to the cabin, it looked like something from an old photograph. Wood siding faded by years of cold. A sagging front porch, a tin chimney still holding its rust like a badge. Inside, the air was stale but familiar. The fireplace still had ashes in it. A fishing rod leaned against the corner by the door, and on the kitchen table under a thin layer of dust sat a stack of notebooks. Spiral-bound. The kind you'd get at a gas station. Each one labeled with a year. The most recent said 2023. I opened it. The first page was in his handwriting, slanted neat, no fuss. If you're reading this, I'm guessing I didn't get the chance to explain much. I wasn't good at that. I watched what happened with your mom. I watched how the family turned silent and how you were always the one expected to smile through it. I wanted to say something back then, but I didn't. I should have. I didn't leave you this place for the value. I left it because you deserve to have a place that never asks you to shrink. A place that holds only what you choose to bring. I hope it brings you peace. I sat in that chair for hours. Reading, thinking, not crying, not exactly. But there was a feeling in my chest I hadn't known in a long time, being seen without being asked to change. The following weeks were quiet. I went back and forth between the cabin and Arizona. I brought Ren up once he said it felt like stepping into someone's story without ruining the plot. We cooked over fire, played cards like kids. There was no Wi-Fi. It was perfect. Mom called once in March. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. Just wanted to say I heard about your grandfather. I know you two weren't close, but I hope you're okay. No guilt, no demands. Just, okay. No, Mia never called. That was okay too. By April, I was staying at the cabin full time. Fixing the place up gave my hands something to do while my head adjusted to peace. One afternoon, I found a letter tucked behind the fuse box. No envelope. Just a piece of paper with my name. They didn't see you, Henry, but I did. I always did. You don't have to prove you belong anymore. You already do. I stood outside that night with a bourbon in hand, listening to the wind off the lake, thinking about all the ways we carry hurt. How sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or clever. It's just leaving. Choosing silence without bitterness. Distance without anger. How maybe peace isn't something you win, it's something you claim quietly on your own terms, like land nobody else knew was yours. I took a picture that night. The lake, the sky, the bare tree line. I sent it to Mom. No caption. She replied the next day, "It's beautiful." That was all, but it felt like enough. 1 year later, almost to the day, I hosted a weekend up north. Just a few people, Ren, his sister, 2 friends from work. Cassie sent a postcard from Oregon with a short note, "Still weird, still wandering. Hope the lake's thawing." It made me smile. I haven't heard from Mia since that last fight. Maybe I never will. Maybe she'll show up one day like Mom did, wearing a coat too light for the season, eyes softer than I remember. Maybe not. I'm okay either way. There's a photo I keep framed in the cabin now. It's one I took of myself. I'm standing on the porch, coffee and hand wind in my hair. No one else in the frame. Just me, finally centered. Finally home. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need permission to heal. You just need to stop asking for a seat at the wrong table. Let them scream. Let them post. Let them spiral. But you get to be free. Story 2. I'm Evan Holloway, 29, and for most of my life I thought invisibility was a personality trait, not a condition imposed from the outside. The condition began the day my sister Sienna arrived 3 years after me, wrapped in blankets that matched the nursery our parents had repainted the night before. From that moment onward, every room in our house turned to face her. Dad Victor, a regional sales manager who liked to call himself the closer, rebranded Sienna as his lucky charm. Mom Marina, ex-cheer captain turned lifestyle blog addict, filmed Sienna's first everything and posted it with captions like, "Our little queen earns her crown again." My milestones were trimmed down to bullet points in the family group chat Evan made honor roll. Nice. At 6, I learned to tie my shoes. At 6, Sienna got a princess-themed block party with a live pony because she'd mastered the same knot. I ate sheet cake crumbs on the porch, telling myself I didn't even like ponies. Middle school should have been a reset button. It wasn't. When I won the district science fair with a solar-powered model car, my parents missed awards night because Sienna's dance rehearsal went long. She stepped on stage for 3 silent counts, waved a plastic wand, and left in Dad's arms to a standing ovation of 2, him and Mom. I rode home in the carpool van, clutching a trophy that glowed neon green under the dome light. Nobody asked how it went. By high school, I'd developed what my therapist later named achievement amnesia. I worked like hell, then edited the victory out of conversation to avoid the dull nods that followed. Straight A transcript filed in a drawer. Early acceptance to State University, left the envelope unopened on my desk until Mom found it, weeks later sighed, and asked how I planned to pay tuition without draining the family card. Meanwhile, Sienna crashed her first car senior year, and Dad surprised her with a newer, safer SUV 3 days later, because safety matters. I rode the bus and memorized its squeaks the way some teens learn guitar chords. College gave me fresh air. I double majored in finance and statistics, paid rent by tutoring athletes, and discovered what it feels like when applause doesn't come pre-scripted. Yet every break I drove home hoping maybe this time someone would notice I'd changed. They never did. Last December, Grandpa Leo, Mom's father, retired machinist and my lone witness, called, asking if I could help install winter shutters on his cottage. Sienna was busy curating her influencer feed, so I spent the weekend on a rickety ladder listening to Grandpa's stories about building airplane parts during the 70s. He asked about my job at Riverfront Analytics, and when I finished describing a project, his eyes went glassy with pride. Smart kid, he said, like he'd stamped a seal on my forehead. 3 weeks later, he was gone. Peaceful heart failure, the doctor said. He left behind an amber glass jar of screws labeled someday and a silence that rang louder than a firing range. The family flew to the funeral in Chicago. Sienna live-streamed herself, placing a single white rose on the casket with the caption, "Always his favorite granddaughter." I vomited behind a maple tree because grief and irony taste similar on the way up. After the burial, we gathered in a mahogany-paneled conference room where Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Calder, unfolded the will. Dad lounged like a king, expecting tribute. Mom dabbed her eyes for the camera she'd propped against a tissue box. Sienna scrolled TikTok and AirPods. Mr. Calder cleared his throat. "Leon Toscano leaves specific bequests to each of you. To my parents, he granted the lake cottage conditional upon its preservation as a family retreat. They nodded already, picturing Airbnb listings. To Sienna, he left the vintage Corvette she'd begged to drive but never earned, plus a trust fund to support artistic exploration." She squealed so loudly the intern outside jumped. Then Mr. Calder turned to me. "Evan, your grandfather allocates $500,000 in securities presently held under your name." He slid a sealed envelope across the table. "And a letter to be opened privately." The temperature in the room sank 10 degrees. Mom's mascaraed eyes sharpened. Dad's jaw reset like a gun hammer. Sienna popped out one AirPod. But $500,000 for Evan? She spoke my name as though it tasted off. Mr. Calder lifted a finger. "And one stipulation, the inheritance cannot be reassigned without forfeiting the entire estate." He paused. Mr. Toscano anticipated pressures. I felt every gaze converge, creditors assessing a windfall. In that instant, I realized Grandpa's final gift wasn't money. It was a fault line running straight through the Holloway hierarchy, and he'd left me perched on its edge. That night, while storm clouds stacked over the cottage, Dad knocked on my old bedroom door. He didn't bother with preamble. "Son, you know Sienna's building her brand. Capital like that could launch a merch line, maybe a boutique. Something meaningful. You've got a salary. Be a team player." Mom appeared behind him, voice syrupy. "Honey family resources should flow where they're most impactful. Think of it as investing in Sienna's future, and by extension, the family's legacy." I stood between them and the suitcase I had yet to unpack, feeling 12 again, standing by a pillar no one would return to. "Grandpa thought the most impactful place was with me," I said quietly. "I'm honoring that." Dad's nostrils flared. "Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word landed like a dart in soft wood. I almost laughed, almost gave in, until Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory. "Smart kid." I met Dad's glare. Grandpa also believed in backups. "If you try to move that money, you lose everything he left you. Read the will." Mom gasped. Sienna shouted from the hall, "This is sabotage!" Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces in a single white-hot frame I'll never forget. Outrage, disbelief, fear of losing a game they assumed was rigged permanently in their favor. That was the moment I stepped out of the spotlight. They'd never aimed at me and lit my own. I left Chicago under a sky that looked like smeared graphite, convinced the storm had ended the night I defied my parents. But the real tempest traveled south with me. The first warning sign waited on my apartment door in Riverfront City, a lavender envelope sealed with gold wax, Mom's signature flair. Inside, a glossy tri-fold proposal begged me to reconsider reallocating resources to Sienna's once-in-a-generation brand expansion. Bullet points outlined projected ROI family unity benefits, and a footnote that read, "Failure to collaborate may necessitate alternative strategies." I almost laughed until I realized they were serious. 2 mornings later, my company's compliance officer, Malik Green, summoned me for an audit triggered by an anonymous tip about insider trading. I work in analytics nowhere near the trading desk, but the caller claimed I'd misused proprietary data. Malik's eyes said he believed the claim was garbage. Still, procedure is procedure. While IT imaged my laptop, I sat in a windowless room counting ceiling tiles and wondering how much sleaze it took to weaponize corporate bureaucracy against your own son. That night, I opened Grandpa's letter, the one I'd saved for calm conditions that never arrived. His handwriting wobbled, but remained deliberate. "Evan, the money is not the gift independence is. Protect it, grow it, then decide who you want to be when no one is directing your spotlight. If the others pressure you, remember the cottage holds more than memories." He'd underlined "more than memories" twice. I pictured the lake house cedar boards soaked with history, and maybe something concrete hidden behind loose paneling. Before I could plan a trip, my neighbor Camilla texted, "Your sister's live right now saying you're mentally unfit." I jumped onto the stream just in time to watch Sienna tearfully explain to 500,000 followers that her estranged brother struggled with paranoid delusions. and was isolating Grandpa's assets out of fear. Donations for her wellness brand scrolled across the screen like stock tickers. The comment section turned into a bonfire. Pray for Sienna. Stop Evan. My phone exploded with unknown numbers calling me thief, abuser, monster. By dawn, someone had doxed my address. Drone footage of my balcony appeared on a gossip channel. I crashed at my coworker Maya Patel's place for safety. Maya, 28, is the kind of friend who labels her tea jars and her emotions with equal precision. She brewed chamomile, listened to my whirlwind recap, then said, "Sounds like they're playing chess with a flamethrower. You need a firewall." She wasn't speaking metaphorically. Her boyfriend Kieran, a white hat hacker with a side hustle rescuing breached nonprofits, offered to trace the anonymous tip and the docs. 48 hours later, he slid a thumb drive across Maya's coffee table. Both attacks routed through a boutique PR firm called Valor Edge, he said. Guess who their newest client is? He spun his laptop to reveal a contract signed by Holloway Family Enterprises, a shell LLC Mom formed last year to manage Sienna's influencer income. Valor Edge specialized in reputation repositioning, which apparently included sabotaging relatives. I felt equal parts betrayed and electrified. They wanted war. They forgot I majored in statistics, the science of proving what people would rather bury. I requested personal leave from work, citing family litigation, and drove to the lake cottage before anyone could tail me. Snow crusted the driveway. Inside, dust motes floated like loosed secrets. I ran fingers along the hallway until one cedar plank echoed hollow. Behind it sat a slim, fireproof box. Inside Grandpa's Wubby Yibby 2 era field journal, several vintage share certificates for a manufacturing cooperative, and an external hard drive labeled Lathworks Ledger. A sticky note read, "These numbers tell a story, one you're strong enough to finish." Back in college, Grandpa had shown me how small discrepancies added up expose big lies. It took a sleepless weekend and 3 gallons of gas station coffee. But I deciphered the ledger for years Dad had quietly borrowed against the cooperative's dividends funds Grandpa had earmarked for employee pensions. The hole was 6 figures deep and widening. Worse, Mom's shell company had laundered part of that cash into cosmetic surgeries, luxury retreats, and Valor Edge's retainer. Evidence in hand, I called Calder Grandpa's attorney. He agreed the embezzlement breached the will's family retreat clause misuse would trigger a mandatory transfer of the cottage and trust oversight to the next eligible heir me. Calder scheduled an emergency probate hearing. When the summons reached my parents, Dad texted a single sentence, "You'll regret this." I replied with a screenshot of the ledger's summary line and the words, "So will the pensioners unless I act." Court day arrived under steel skies identical to funeral week. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Sienna confronted me, mascara flawless fury simmering. "You love this, don't you? Playing Crusader while my followers crucify me." I almost reminded her she'd lit the match, but pain nested behind her arrogance. Maybe she believed Mom's narrative that resources equaled love. Instead, I said, "I don't love any of this." But Grandpa trusted me to protect what he built. You can still build something honest, just not with stolen bricks. Her eyes flickered recognition, fighting pride, but the bailiff opened the door before she could answer. The hearing was brief. Calder presented the misappropriation. Dad's lawyer sputtered half-formed objections. The judge ordered an immediate forensic audit and granted me temporary conservatorship over the cottage and related assets. Mom gasped. Dad's shoulders sagged as if the room lost oxygen. Outside the courthouse, microphones sprouted like weeds. I stepped up, voice steady. My grandfather believed in accountability and community. Today I honored both. No further comment. Cameras flashed. I walked away not as the invisible child, but as custodian of a legacy heavier than cash responsibility. That night I returned to Maya's apartment exhausted yet clear-eyed. We toasted with ginger ale. She asked what came next. I said, "Phase 2, repair the damage, then decide how to forgive people who aren't sorry." She smiled, a scientist's smile, hypothesis forming. Lightning rippled in distant clouds, but for the first time in weeks, I knew which storms were weather and which were war, and I finally had a map for both. The audit order hit like a starter pistol. Within 48 hours, Calder assembled a forensic team led by Dr. Lydia Mercer, a number savant who spoke in verbs more than nouns. She unpacked her laptop in the cottage's dining room, spread ledger pages across checkered tablecloth, and said, "We follow the cash, we follow the motives, we cauterize the bleed." I nodded and brewed the strongest coffee. Michigan sells without a license. While she traced payments, I called Riverfront Manufacturing Cooperative's union president, Jorge Ayala, and explained the missing pension funds. He answered with a silence so thick I feared the call had dropped. Then he whispered, "You sure I sent the summary sheet?" 10 minutes later, he replied with a roster for an emergency town hall. Phase 2 began. The meeting filled the cooperative's machine shop, air scented with cutting oil and betrayal. Welders, assemblers, clerks' faces Grandpa once knew by name stared at me like a surgeon holding bad x-rays. I projected the ledger onto a grease-stained tarp and walked them through every siphon dollar, each slide a bruise. When I finished, Jorge stepped forward. "Folks, we can press charges, but lawsuits drag. Mr. Holloway," he pointed at me, "says he can recover the loss through the estate." Murmurs rippled. A gray-haired operator named Ruth asked, "Can we trust you any more than him?" Her finger arced toward a live feed on someone's phone. Dad on a local news set claiming the audit was a hostile maneuver by a disgruntled son chasing clout. I answered simply, "Judge me by the repairs I make, not the mess I inherited." Ruth's eyes narrowed, weighing. Finally, she shrugged. "Clock's ticking." The room exhaled not trust, but a provisional ceasefire. Back at the cottage, Dr. Mercer discovered a pattern. Dad had buried monthly transfers to an offshore account labeled Laguna Vista Consulting, Valeredge's shadow budget. She smiled without warmth. "Your parents paid mercenaries to torch your reputation, then charged the pension fund for matches." She forwarded the data to Calder for the court's injunction request, then packed up. "You'll need witness affidavits. The union is step 1. Get them under oath before your father rewrites the timeline." I drove to Riverfront City the next morning and walked straight into a PR ambush. Valeredge had plastered digital billboards downtown with Sienna's tear-streaked face beside the slogan, "Family shouldn't hurt family." Beneath it, a subheading, "Tell Evan to do the right thing." QR codes linked to a petition demanding I relinquish control of Grandpa's assets for mental health evaluation. The petition had 250,000 signatures of viral parasite. I felt the city staring. Camilla texted coordinates for a safe cafe. Inside, Kieran slid another thumb drive across the table. Valeredge purchased a deepfake service. He played a clip, me or a version of me, ranting about fleecing old factory workers while laughing. The audio sync was nearly perfect, except my right eyebrow never moved. That was their glitch. Kieran paused the video. They're seeding it in fringe forums first, letting outrage mature before mainstream pickup. Maya squeezed my hand. "We need counter-narratives. Proof, not just denials." I remembered Grandpa's journal, its wartime stories of sabotage and misdirection. He'd survived by broadcasting enemy codes back at them louder so truth drowned lies. Inspiration sparked. They want theater, we give them documentary. That night, I filmed a single-take confession in the cottage workshop. No script, no edits, just me. Dr. Mercer's audit highlights projected on the wall behind. I explained the ledger, the union's vote, the deepfake eyebrow tell. I invited independent journalists to verify every document, then signed off. My grandfather believed that light beats rot. I'm holding the flashlight, the rest is up to you. We pushed the video to multiple platforms simultaneously. Within hours, Eyebrowgate trended. Tech analysts broke down the deepfake frame by frame. Journalists requested the audit packets. Calder released them under a permanent public link. Momentum flipped. The petition plateaued, then bled signatures as fast as bots could add them. Dad's news anchor backed off, citing new information. Valeredge scrubbed their billboards by dawn, but screenshots lived forever. Cornered Mom deployed her last card, a lawsuit claiming my conservatorship caused Sienna irreparable emotional distress, hampering her career. The filing hit social media before it reached my mailbox. Sienna posted a slowed-down video of herself crying beside legal papers, but her followers now wary after Eyebrowgate flooded comments with emojis. Public doubt cut deeper than any lawyer's brief. Still, lawsuits are real, even when the optics sour. Calder warned the stress claim could delay pension reimbursements for months, maybe years. Union patience frayed. Ruth left me a voicemail at 3 a.m., voice shaking. "They're old, Evan. We can't wait for court seasons." I stared at the ceiling fan, spinning guilt. Kieran called with a lifeline. "What if you accelerate restitution? Liquidate a chunk of the trust, pay the pensions up front, then let the estate recoup later." It meant risking my safety net, but money sitting idle while workers feared eviction felt obscene. Dr. Mercer ran scenarios. The math worked if market conditions held. I authorized the transfer. Calder drafted agreements ensuring reimbursements counted towards settlement credits. When Jorge announced the checks cleared, the factory floor rang with a sound I'd never heard inside those walls. Applause meant for me. A witness filmed it. The clip went modestly viral, titled "The Accountant Who Paid Us Back." Valor Edge tried labeling it staged, but independent footage from security cams buried that angle. The tide shifted at home too. Aunt Delia Mom's estranged sister emailed me, "Proud of you. Your parents forgot what dignity costs. Call if you need statements." I filed her note under allies and exhaled for the first time in weeks. Yet every victory carries embers. The trust balance now rode market winds, and a single downturn could drown me. Sienna went silent on socials, a silence that felt like a fuse, not surrender. Dad's lawyer demanded depositions. Dates stacked on my calendar like dominoes. Phase 2 had patched the hull, but Phase 3, the long voyage through litigation, reconciliation, and whatever forgiveness looked like, loomed dark beyond the horizon. I ended the week back at the cottage dock, late winter ice popping along the pilings. Maya joined me, breath visible. "Storm's easing," she said. I skimmed a pebble across black water. Or regrouping. She slipped a folded note into my pocket, hand-drawn blueprints for a small outreach center Grandpa once dreamed of converting the boathouse into. "Build something," she whispered, "before they burn everything." I watched the pebble sink, thought about rot and light, and understood Maya's real challenge: wield the inheritance not just to plug holes, but to craft a structure no smear campaign could raise. The map I carried suddenly had a destination. I squared my shoulders against the cold mind already drafting blueprints. Phase 3 would test more than finances. It would measure whether independence could evolve into leadership worthy of a machinist's legacy. And somewhere out there, a silent fuse kept burning. The cottage boathouse smelled of cedar and mold when I opened the doors, but in my mind, I already saw glass walls catching sunrise and a hand-painted sign, "Toscano Community Workshop." Grandpa's sketches pinned to one beam, Maya's render on my phone, and the union's promise of volunteer labor formed the triangle that guided me forward. I filed zoning papers Monday, hired a structural engineer. Tuesday, and by Wednesday, the place echoed with hammer strikes as welders from the cooperative traded shifts for daylight work. Blue sparks met blue lake, a symmetry Grandpa would have loved. Momentum drew allies. A retired art teacher named Mrs. Hollowbrook donated easels. Camilla's podcast ran a segment titled "Fixing Things the Holloway Way." Even Ruth from the factory stopped by with her college-age grandson Quiet Nate, who sanded planks like penance for someone else's sin. Every person left a thumbprint on the dream, and every thumbprint anchored me against the lawsuit cyclone still spinning in the distance. That cyclone moved closer when Judge Patel scheduled depositions. Mom arrived first, draped in pearl gray eyes rehearsed for sorrow. She called my actions reckless philanthropy and insisted I was weaponizing grief. Dad followed, tense, claiming ignorance of the pension siphon, while records projected behind him said otherwise. Sienna walked in last, mascara subtle this time, and when her attorney asked about emotional distress, she hesitated. Cameras clicked. I watched her wrestle between brand and blood. Finally, she said, "I'm hurt. He shut me out, but I'm more hurt by what I've learned." Her lawyer winced. Dad's jaw tightened. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd held. Outside reporters crowded. One asked Sienna if she supported the outreach center. She glanced at me. Spaces that teach real skills, hard to dislike. The quote hit social feeds hours later, cracking Valor Edge's narrative like ice under a truck. Valor Edge responded by playing dirty. That night, an anonymous complaint reached the county inspector. The boathouse lacked historical preservation permits. Work halted, volunteers frustrated. Kieran traced the tip to a burner account funded by Surprise Laguna Vista Consulting. Dr. Mercer bundled evidence. Calder filed a motion for contempt, but paperwork moved slower than sabotage. Instead of waiting, I adapted. We shifted to off-site prep volunteers, built workbenches in Jorge's warehouse, students designed signage in Mrs. Hollowbrook's garage. The pause became publicity. Local news ran a feature on resilient renovation boosting donations. 3 days later at 2 a.m., my phone erupted. Fire alarms at the cottage. I broke speed limits driving up the ridge, heart drumming a Morse code of dread. Flames licked the boathouse roof. Firefighters fought the blaze, water arching like silver spears. The main house stood safe. Someone set only the structure we were rebuilding. I watched the roof cave, heat welding grief into bone. When the last ember hissed, the chief handed me charred debris, a gas can with no fingerprints. A scorched flyer from the deepfake petition melted to its side. Message received. Maya arrived before dawn, wrapped me in a blanket that smelled of clove tea. "They think fire ends blueprints," she whispered. I shook my head. Smoke-stinging eyes already raw. "Fire's just another tool." The phrase felt foreign until I remembered Grandpa teaching me to temper steel with volume. Strength through heat. I stood mind pivoting. Insurance covered basic loss, but rebuilding twice demanded cash I'd poured into pensions. Union workers learning of the arson offered overtime for free. A crowdfunding campaign Maya launched hit 6 figures in 12 hours. The same people Valor Edge manipulated now fed our reconstruction. Hashtags flipped. Rise from ashes trended beside images of the burnt frame silhouetted against dawn. Investigators confirmed accelerant traces matched a brand stocked at Dad's cabin supply store. Circumstantial, yet damning. Calder requested a restraining order against both parents. The judge, alarmed, froze their access to estate funds pending criminal inquiry. For the first time, Dad couldn't purchase spin. Days blurred into sawdust and court filings. Sienna visited the ruins, unannounced, sunglasses failing to hide swollen eyes. She walked the blackened foundation, stopping where easels had once leaned. "I didn't start this," she said quietly, "but I amplified it." Wind off the lake tugged her hair as if nature wanted the confession louder. I said nothing, letting her words sit like fresh concrete. After a minute, she pulled a USB drive from her coat. "Valor Edge's strategy decks. Proof of every hit job. Use it." She turned to leave, then paused. "I still want a career, but not one built on ashes." That fuse I'd sensed finally sparked towards something like remorse. Kieran decrypted the files, timelines, social bot inventories, even scripts for future deepfakes planned if I stayed obstinate. With this arsenal, Calder negotiated a ceasefire. Mom and Dad dropped the distress suit, agreed to restitution schedules, and signed a public apology drafted by Jorge's committee. Valor Edge terminated their contract statement cold as cut marble services concluded. Legal battles winding down, I faced the larger question. Build again or pivot. The lake property haunted by scorch marks still held Grandpa's spirit, but community work needed a home sooner than permits would allow. Ruth suggested converting an unused wing of the cooperatives plant. Union vote passed unanimously. We named the Space Lathe Works Learning Center, homage to Grandpa's ledgers that saved their pensions. Opening day. Spring sunlight poured through refurbished windows onto fresh paint. Machines lined one wall, art tables filled another. Kids from local schools tested 3D printers while retirees taught them to read micrometers. Sienna arrived with zero entourage phone pocketed. She filmed a single clip, no filters, showing Ruth guiding Nate through a welding bead. Caption: "Real influence isn't merch, it's mentorship." Comments overflowed with support. I caught her eye across the room. She mouthed, "Thank you." I answered with a nod that carried no sarcasm, only possibility. Late that night, I stood alone in the center, humming machines now silent, and imagined Grandpa leaning against a column, arms crossed, grin, small but fierce. "Smart kid," he would say. I whispered back, "Stubborn too." The journey wasn't done. Criminal charges loomed. Market volatility threatened the trust. Reconciliation with parents lay tangled, but the foundation felt solid again, forged in flame, funded by truth, held up by hands that once doubted me. Outside the lake reflected a sky free of smoke, and for the first time since the will reading, I believed the horizon belonged to us all. The Learning Center's smell of new varnish still lingered when the first tremor hit. A global supply scare spooked investors. Indices swung like broken gate hinges. Dr. Mercer called at dawn, voice clipped. The trust's tech portfolio is down 9% and sliding. If it breaches 12, our restitution buffer evaporates. I pictured dominoes, the pensions we'd repaid, renovation invoices, volunteer insurance, all balanced on a market graph I couldn't control. Kieran suggested hedging with options, but I lacked the liquidity. Maya brewed coffee darker than night shifts and said, "We need revenue that doesn't float on Wall Street." Her eyes drifted to the center's machine row. That afternoon, Jorge's technicians reprogrammed 3 CNC lathes for small batch manufacturing. By evening, we'd uploaded prototypes, custom bike components, artisan brass knobs onto a crowdfunding marketplace. Nate filmed a slick demo. Sienna narrated with the same velvet tone once used for sponsored makeup. Orders outpaced capacity in 48 hours, converting goodwill into cash flow, stable enough to calm Dr. Mercer's spreadsheet. While we built new income, detectives built a case. The arson investigation traced purchase logs back to Dad's corporate card. Surveillance footage showed him loading gas cans into a rented SUV the night of the fire. An arrest warrant landed like thunder. Mom lawyered up, calling the proof circumstantial. Yet, when confronted with Valor Edge's fire sale emails contained fallout from planned structural deterrent, she negotiated a plea, testify against Dad for reduced charges. Betrayal nestled comfortably inside their marriage, it seemed. The news broke during a welding class. Phones buzzed, sparks hissed. I stepped outside winter light slicing through workshop windows and watched live stream footage of Dad led from his office in cuffs. Commentators spewed takes, some gloating, others mourning a once-respected businessman. I felt no triumph, only the dull ache of watching a bridge collapse you'd already stopped crossing. That night, Mom called from an unknown number. I expected rage. Instead, her voice was paper thin. "Your father's bail hearing is Friday. They'll freeze all shared accounts. I have nothing." Silence stretched. I realized she'd never distinguished love from lifestyle until the latter drained away. She whispered, "Victor won't survive prison." I answered with the truth neither of us could dodge. Dad set a building on fire. My friends were inside hours earlier. He chose that risk. She cried soft, embarrassed tears, but offered no defense. Before hanging up, she asked, "Is the workshop really helping people?" I described Ruth tutoring a veteran on a plasma cutter, kids calculating angles for skateboard trucks, a widower 3D printing a prosthetic grip for his arthritic hand. Mom inhaled sharply as if tasting a life she'd never considered, and said, "I wish your grandfather had shown me that place." I said, "He tried. You were filming Sienna's recital." She whispered, "I remember then." The line clicked dead. The bail hearing drew a circus of cameras. Sienna and I attended united by necessity. Dad appeared gaunt, suit hanging like borrowed skin. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk and community endangerment. Mom, seated 2 rows ahead, flinched. Sienna reached over the aisle and squeezed her shoulder. I studied the gesture, compassion unfiltered by brand managers, and felt a fissure in old resentments. Outside, court reporters swarmed. One shoved a mic toward me. "Evan, any comment on your father's detention?" I answered evenly. Accountability isn't vengeance, it's maintenance. Like oiling a lathe, you do it so the next generation doesn't seize up. The quote trended for 20 minutes before a celebrity scandal bumped us, which suited me fine. Yet tremors kept coming. A watchdog nonprofit flagged deficiencies in our center's safety protocols, nothing malicious, just growth outpacing governance. Ruth warned, "We can't survive scrutiny if we're sloppy." We halted classes for a weekend overhaul. Sienna leveraged her follower graph, rallying volunteer safety consultants. Within 48 hours, exit lights gleamed, first aid kits multiplied, and someone painted a mural of Grandpa wielding a torque wrench under the caption, "Craft with care." Seeing Sienna roll paint while Nate steadied the ladder, I glimpsed what family looked like without Spotlight's messy cooperation. Financially, the income stream from CNC orders steadied. Dr. Mercer rebalanced the trust into green infrastructure bonds, lower yield, low volatility. Market storms calmed, our buffer held. The union board voted to make the Learning Center a formal apprenticeship pipeline, pledging annual dues. If Phase 1 was defense and Phase 2 repair, we were now in creation mode, my favorite territory. Then the district attorney offered a plea bargain. Dad would admit guilt to third-degree arson, serve 4 years, and repay restitution from personal assets. The hitch. They required a victim impact statement. Calder drafted legal prose, but words felt sterile. I sat at the lake docks, laptop open, cold wind, folding pages of Grandpa's journal. His note about independence echoed, "Decide who you want to be when no one is directing your spotlight." I wrote plainly, he endangered lives, betrayed trust, but he is still my father. Justice must teach him what legacy truly means. I included examples of the center's success names, not numbers, arguing that rebuilding requires consequences, not annihilation. The DA accepted. The judge scheduled sentencing. The night before the hearing, Mom drove to the cottage. No cameras, no pearls. She handed me a small box, Grandpa's broken pocket watch Dad had kept in a drawer. "It stopped the day your grandfather died," she murmured. "Maybe you can make it run again." Moonlight silvered her exhausted face. "Why bring this?" I asked. She stared across the lake. "Because time shouldn't freeze with grief." She paused, battling words. "I'm sorry I filmed instead of listening. To you. To him." Her apology, imperfect, trembling, felt more real than any settlement. I nodded, unsure how forgiveness blooms, but aware the seed had been planted. Sentencing day dawned brittle cold. Dad shackled faced the court while Sienna, Mom, and I sat together. My statement played on screen. I watched him flinch when I described the volunteers he nearly torched. The judge delivered 4 years and mandatory restitution audits. As deputies led Dad away, he locked eyes with me. Regret, fury? Maybe both. Yet I sensed something else, relief, finally catching up to a lifetime of hustle. Outside reporters swarmed again, but this time I raised a palm. No questions. Today belongs to the people inside that building. Cameras clicked anyway, but the center's launch overshadowed court drama. News outlets preferred stories about kids welding hope. That evening, the Learning Center hosted its first community showcase. Projects lined tables, custom bike forks engraved memory boxes, a drone frame designed by Nate. Sienna emceed, voice steady but humble. Mom hovered near the mural fingers, brushing Grandpa's painted wrench, as if tracing a conduit back to herself. I wound the pocket watch gears, protesting until suddenly they clicked smooth. The second hand stuttered, then swept forward. Time moving again. I slipped the watch into a display case beside Grandpa's original lathe journal, labeling it Cycle of Repair. Maya joined me by the door, leaning into my shoulder. Phase 3, she asked. I thought of markets, stabilize pensions, secure a father. Confronting walls, he built a mother, relearning worth, a sister shaping influence into impact. Phase 3's in motion, I said, watching visitors file past sparks dancing off steel. Phase 4 is the long haul, turning tremors into steady ground. I didn't know if the center would survive every future quake, if reconciliation could outlast pain, or if Dad would emerge transformed. But as machinery hummed and laughter ricocheted off fresh drywall, I believed. In structures strong enough to flex spruce beams, welded joints, human hearts. The horizon no longer felt distant. It pulsed inside these walls, measured not by profit margins or follower counts, but by the simple rhythm of a pocket watch finally keeping time. Spring bled into early summer, and the Learning Center settled into a beat so steady it felt like a metronome guiding us forward. Monday through Thursday, we ran apprenticeship rotations. Fridays, we opened doors to anyone curious enough to pick up a chisel or code a drone. The CNC line produced a backlog of custom bike forks, now branded Holloway Toscano proceeds, split between pensions and scholarship funds. Ruth called it a victory lap for dignity. I called it proof that blue-collar brilliance can run on digital rails without losing its soul. Market swings still happened, but Dr. Mercer's bond ladder cushioned each jolt. When a tech sell-off shaved 5% off the trust, the center's revenue bridge filled the gap without panic. Jorge, once skeptical of my spreadsheets, now introduced me at union meetings as our in-house shock absorber. Hearing laughter instead of suspicion told me wounds were closing, scar tissue forming where anger once lived. Mom visited every other weekend, arriving in a used hatchback she'd bought after liquidating luxury cars to pay her share of restitution. She started teaching a basic accounting class, nothing glamorous, just clean books and common sense budgeting, but seeing her rewrite her identity, one invoice at a time, felt like watching a tall building pivot on its foundation. The first night she stayed late, organizing receipts beside Nate, she looked up and said, half to herself, "My worth is finally measurable without followers or handbags," I replied. "Dad will be proud if you keep that up." The words surprised us both, but neither backed away. Sienna's channel rebranded to Repair and Flair, mixing DIY tutorials shot in the center, with candid talks on influence ethics. Algorithms fickle as weather rewarded authenticity, her subscriber count climbed beyond its pre-scandal peak. She funneled ad revenue into materials grants, and each donation carried her signature pastel logo stamped on a packing slip, branding revamped to serve not siphon. During a live stream, she interviewed Ruth about welding arcs and ended by quoting Grandpa Light Beats Rot. Comments exploded with applause emojis. No bots this time, just people leaning into redemption. Kieran and Maya, our resident problem solvers, designed an online platform syncing leftover machine hours from small shops to community projects nationwide. They asked to name it Laguna Vista, reclaiming the shell company Dad abused. We voted yes, turning poisoned letters into a badge of reclamation. The beta launch matched underused lathes in Ohio with a high school robotics club in Oregon before the sunset. I stared at the live dashboard dots connecting across states and felt the horizon widen past the lake's edge. 4 months into Dad's sentence, I drove 3 hours to the medium security facility, pocket watch ticking steady beside my heart. The visitation room buzzed with fluorescent hums. He shuffled in prison-issue khakis hanging loose. For a moment, we just studied each other, the silence thick with everything unsaid. Then he spoke, voice rasped. "Looks like you found your spotlight." I answered, "Turns out it was never a spotlight, more like a welder's torch." He almost smiled. I slid across the table a hand-drawn blueprint of a small vocational program he could help design for inmates earning early release credits. "You once closed deals." "Help me open doors," I said. He traced lines with calloused fingers, eyes damp. "I don't deserve this." I shook my head. Deserve has nothing to do with repair. When the guard signaled time, Dad pressed the diagram to his chest like a fragile part. As I left, the pocket watch ticked louder, urging forward motion. Back home, the center prepared for its first graduation. 10 apprentices ages 18 to 59 finished certifications in CNC Operation Industrial Safety and Financial Literacy. Families filled folding chairs, sparks flew in demonstration booths. Mrs. Hollowbrook's students unveiled a mural of interlocking gears forming a human heart. I delivered closing remarks, voice steady. Despite the lump lodged halfway up my throat, a machinist's legacy isn't metal or money. It's momentum, each of us passing kinetic energy to the next set of hands. The watch in my pocket kept perfect time, each tick a quiet amen. Later that night, after volunteers swept sawdust and laughter echoed off into memory, Maya and I sat on the dock. Fireflies stitched gold threads across water, and the boathouse ruins now cleared. Foundation ready for future phases reflected moonlight like a blank page. "What's phase 4? She asked, head on my shoulder. I thought of blueprints circulating through correctional facilities, union members mentoring strangers online, my mother balancing ledgers, my sister influencing without manipulation, my father tracing new pathways behind fences. I thought of myself no longer invisible, but still learning to stand without casting shadows on others. Phase 4, I said, is scaling grace. We watched the horizon where lake met sky, a seam suggesting limitless fabric. The pocket watch ticked not as a reminder of time lost, but as proof of time reclaimed, gears aligned after generations of misfire. I wrapped an arm around Maya, feeling the subtle weight of responsibility and possibility balanced like a tool in a practiced hand. Beyond us, the learning center's windows glowed soft, each pane holding a reflection of someone who once doubted their worth and now forged it. For the first time, I felt no tremor underfoot, only the gentle rhythm of progress, steady, relentless, alive. The long haul had begun, and it sounded like hope, measured in heartbeats and hammer strikes, perfectly in sync with a watch that refused to stop.